And usually you tell moms the benefits of breastfeeding, why you should, the dad or grandparents, the benefit of it. They're like, wow, I didn't know that.
It's not that I don't want to breastfeed, it's just, it's not working at all for our family.
With me being in school now, of course, I'm not full breastfeeding all the time, but I do pump when I'm away. So the powder formula helps as well.
Hi, and welcome to Southern Remedy. I'm Dr. Rick DeShazo.
And I'm Melissa Faith Payne.
Breast milk and breastfeeding have great benefits for infants.
Yes, Dr. Rick, but Mississippi has one of the lowest percentages of moms who leave the hospital breastfeeding or continue it for the recommended 6 months. And for African American moms in Mississippi and across the country, the rates are even lower.
We'll hear from healthcare providers, advocates, and new moms to learn more about infant feeding choices.
I have had a lifelong interest in nutrition, and I breastfed all 3 of my children, and my daughter now is breastfeeding my grandchild. So just from a personal standpoint, I have an interest in the benefits of breastfeeding, but professionally, I really got on the breastfeeding bandwagon when the data was clear that it benefited premature babies.
I first decided to breastfeed with my first child, Todd. He was born at 30 weeks prematurely, and he was about 2 pounds when he came. So I was afraid, and it was all new to me. I didn't really know what to do. The doctors advised that I breastfeed, and they told me that it would help him to gain weight, and it would help him develop more. And he was out of the hospital in 2 weeks, and he weighed 5 pounds when he left. He was a little fat baby compared to the size that he started at 2 pounds, and it's just been good watching him grow, and he's not behind, and I feel like that breastfeeding has helped him get to where he needs to be.
Breastfeeding keeps babies alive in the first year of life. We see fewer babies die when they're breastfed, and there are several causes for death in the first year that breastfeeding improves, and one of the big ones in Mississippi is it reduces the rate of SIDS. So if a mother breastfeeds exclusively for the first 6 months, we expect the SIDS rate to go down dramatically.
So my first pregnancy was challenging in many ways. It was obviously scary just because it was my first time ever being pregnant, so I didn't really know anything about what to expect. And then with twins, it added complications. I'm also advanced to maternal age, so I was already high risk. And I developed preeclampsia, had to go on bed rest, had to be hospitalized several times, and then delivered them at 34 weeks via C-section.
You initially have a lot of fears with preemies if they're putting on enough weight and actually eating, because they can't sustain themselves the same as a regular newborn.
We want all premature babies while they're in the hospital and after they go home to receive mother's milk because it does improve their survival rate. It also improves growth for these babies. So we think that breastfed term babies as well as preterm babies have better growth rates.
My decision to breastfeed was really based on reading that it's supposed to be better nutritionally for the babies, good for their immunity, which I was of course worried about, especially with preemies. Wanted to make sure they were as healthy as possible. So I did my best and nursed them some, but also moved towards pumping and adding that to every bottle so that every bottle had some breast milk, but we supplemented with formula because I just couldn't make enough to keep up with those 2 little hungry girls.
Formula feeding clearly is not as good as breastfeeding. The micronutrients and macronutrients in formula do not come close to what's present in breast milk. In addition, there are a lot of other factors in breast milk that make those nutrients more available to the baby. So, for instance, iron is much more available. Even though it's present in low quantities in breast milk, it's much more available to the baby than cow's milk has for iron availability and other minerals.
Breast milk has a lot of stuff that the formula does not have. And by that, it gives the baby enough nutrients in their body to grow more and more. Especially when a newborn is born, they're kind of small. Breast milk will really get them on their weight.
In addition, the protein is human protein, which is a huge benefit for human babies to get human protein.
For me, breastfeeding helped my bonds with both of my children. We were just close. The closeness of having your child with you and developing it's just amazing because you're the one person in the world. You have everything that they need.
It's a pleasure to have Dr. Mary Kosek, who's professor of pediatrics and a neonatologist, a little baby doctor, from the University of Mississippi Medical Center here with us. What is the length of time that breastfeeding has been shown to be beneficial?
Well, it's recommended for at least 6 months, but many of the studies go on to up to a year and more.
You are especially intent on trying to get breast milk to premature babies. Why is that?
Well, the main reason is for the immunoprotective factors. And one of the most common conditions that we see in the tiny preemies is called necrotizing enterocolitis, which is a very severe bowel condition that babies can have, especially in premature babies. And we know that their breast milk has been shown to be beneficial for those babies.
What kind of investigations are y'all doing at UMMC in this area?
Well, we've got one big breastfeeding study. We're looking with Dr. Ojeda. We are looking at the leptins in breast milk. We're looking at 1,000 babies, and we're looking at the leptins in the breast milk that the mothers they give us.
And so does breastfeeding have any effect on weight later in life?
It does. The babies that have been breastfed for at least 6 months show a lower body mass index. The babies later on as adults have less problems with obesity and diabetes and metabolic illnesses. And that's after weaning out the variables in many different studies.
So we have such a low rate of breastfeeding. Why do we have trouble getting our moms to start breastfeeding and continuing the recommended period of 6 months?
Well, I think some of the reasons for not starting is just not having enough information and not having the information of the benefits of breastfeeding. There's lots of cultural and social issues. There's young mothers. We've got a big teen population, and there's a lot of reluctance, I think, for teenagers to breastfeed.
What do you say to moms that can't breastfeed?
We try to work with the moms. We give them the information and the merits and do the supportive teaching, while they're pregnant and the teaching postpartum, and we work with them. And it's really kind of up to the mothers and the families, whatever meets their situation the best. And I know that you're right. Sometimes people have a tendency to make them feel very guilty that they cannot successfully breastfeed for any certain amount of time, and sometimes they physically just can't.
When do you introduce solid foods or other foods, and what is the process?
Well, the American Academy doesn't recommend introducing any solids until 6 months. The take-home message is that the protein that help their bodies and their brain grow is in the formula or the breast milk. The other things that they substitute, the rice cereal and the fruits and vegetables, those are kind of empty calories. They don't really provide a lot of protein.
So don't babies who are breastfed cry more and stay awake all night, and aren't they more difficult to handle?
Well, that's a good question. It may be just their nature. And I think sometimes mothers have a tendency when babies cry more, not just mothers, but grandparents and babysitters have a tendency when the babies cry more to express themselves, they feed them more. And then they become big babies.
Human milk for human babies. The medical evidence is clear on its benefits. Still, barriers to this nutrition exist.
Breastfeeding rates here in Mississippi are the lowest in the nation. I think Louisiana is the next lowest in the nation. So we really need to, educate moms more about breastfeeding, have more breastfeeding policies for moms.
There's been legislation in Mississippi in recent years regarding breastfeeding in public. It had previously been potentially a misdemeanor to breastfeed in public because of exposure. of private parts of the body. That is now no longer the case.
We are feeding our children when we breastfeed, and they wanted to relegate us to the back of the bus, so to speak, to a nasty restroom to feed our children.
I personally have not had anyone say anything negative to me about public nursing. I definitely feel self-conscious about it still, though, because I have heard friends who have had trouble.
Well, for me, at first, with my first child, I think that breastfeeding was kind of embarrassing, being in public, having to do that, because I didn't pump in the beginning, because you're not supposed to pump in the beginning. But with Addison, it's natural, and I don't see anything wrong with it. I think breastfeeding is beautiful, and no matter where you do it, as long as you have a blanket and put over yourself. That's what I did, and I breastfed wherever I was. Even with a cover, it is awkward. You may accidentally flash someone. You worry about it, and it definitely, like, I've been doing that less and less.
She also has a protection under Mississippi state law. If she's using a daycare facility, that daycare is required to provide 5 things for her: a comfortable chair, electrical outlet so that she can express the milk, a private secure place or space other than the restroom for her to express the milk, and refrigeration to store the milk, because they are responsible for feeding that baby. And they have to follow CDC guidelines in handling that breast milk.
I think about all the people who do not have this, but I have my own office, so I can close the door, lock it, and have time to pump. I'm also very lucky that I have incredibly supportive coworkers.
And so I have had moms to tell me at the hospital, they say, well, the nurse at the hospital told me that formula is just like breastfeeding. I said, who told you that? What hospital was that? So there's a lot of nurses and stuff that are not educated about breastfeeding. A lot of doctors are still not educated about breastfeeding, so they usually tell moms that it's all right to do both.
The medical community is just like the lay community in that they have some misinformation and some of the old ideas about breastfeeding, and some of that was actually propagated by the formula companies in the 50s and 60s when formulas were first used on a widespread basis. So a lot of it is misinformation still.
The biggest problem we have in Mississippi among breastfeeding continues and around the country among black moms. And that is not just black moms who are poor and on WIC, that's black moms in general. I don't understand this because at one time, black women had the highest prevalence of breastfeeding. We used to breastfeed or be wet nurses for white women when we were enslaved around the country. And I don't understand, well, I do understand, is the formula industry.
So it's a lot of problems when you're trying to encourage moms to breastfeed, and then they go to a doctor's appointment and you have somebody sticking formula in their face telling them this is best. Because usually the doctor's office, people think, okay, they know best. And so they tend to think, okay, I should give formula instead of breastfeeding.
For the people that think that breastfeeding is disgusting in public places, and there are some of those places that don't want you to breastfeed, I think it's immature, and I think that they don't know how natural and beautiful it is. I mean, breastfeeding it's feeding your child, so I think that any place that doesn't allow that, it's just nowhere that I'd want to be, ever. And having the support of Adrian, her dad, is just a blessing. He's always there in whatever decision I make, whether it's breastfeeding or not breastfeeding, he always has my back.
I think we've made a lot of progress, but I think we still have a long way to go before before mothers feel really supported.
Breast or bottle? This is a question every new mom is faced with after giving birth on how their infant will eat. Well, today 4 moms are here to talk about what drove their decisions for their feeding choices. Welcome to all of you, and thank you guys so much for being here. We'll start with you, Nadia. So you have 3 children and you have a new baby girl, and you're exclusively breastfeeding her, but your older children you breastfed and supplemented. What's the difference this go round?
Well, with my youngest daughter, I chose to exclusively breastfeed because formula is expensive, and I did not want to. I did not want to spend the money With my older two, I was in school full time while they were young, and so I was on WIC with them, and so that helped. Just WIC being able to provide that formula. But now I'm not on WIC, and so I looked at the cost of formula yesterday when I was at the grocery store. I think it was like $30 a can, and so I just did not want to spend that type of money on formula. And I felt like I could do it exclusively breastfeed. It is hard. I do work full time, but I just made that commitment to say, okay, this is what I'm going to do until I'm ready to wean her off of breast milk.
Okay. Ellie, what about you? You have a little boy, new little boy, and are you breastfeeding, bottle feeding?
Well, when I was in the hospital, I did start off breastfeeding, and before I even went into labor, I did purchase a breast pump. I had every intention of breastfeeding, and at one point, I just didn't produce. I kept trying, and we decided to formula feed instead because it was what was right for the family.
Patrice, what about you? You're a mom of 3. Breastfeeding, bottle feeding?
Both.
Okay.
Right now, yeah. So, but he gets about 5 ounces. I'm supplementing with formula, so he gets about 5 ounces of formula per day. My goal was to exclusively breastfeed, but once he started daycare, unfortunately, I didn't have enough breast milk stored up. That is one of my biggest regrets, was not investing in that in the double pump ahead of time while we were still at home together, and so I haven't been able to, get that storage up.
Right.
So supplementing with formula, as I did my oldest too, and I know formula is a great thing, but I am determined to continue to breastfeed, until he's a year old.
Okay. Monica, what about you? You're a stay-at-home mom, and you have 3 under the age of 3.
I do. Well, yeah.
Practically.
Practically, yeah.
And so you're the newest baby, breastfeeding or bottle feeding?
So right now we're strictly bottle feeding.
Okay.
Started out breastfeeding. I love breastfeeding. I actually encourage new moms to breastfeed. With me, I actually had to have a cesarean. So with having a C-section in the hospital and trying to recover from that, the baby was demanding. I could tell he was hungry, and having started out, it just seemed like when I would breastfeed, he would still want more, and I'm in pain. So at that point, I needed to supplement because he was demanding more milk, and I was just not able to give it to him like he needed it. So we decided to supplement in the hospital, and from then I did continue breastfeeding, but then we had other situations to come up and help determine to just strictly bottle feed. So that's where we are now.
And I hear a lot of you guys talking about, at least you started out breastfeeding in the hospital. And we have stats that say, from the CDC, that say, about 61% of moms start out breastfeeding, but by the time they hit 6 months, like 28% are the only ones remaining still breastfeeding. Why do you think that is? Because some of you guys have actually experienced that.
I think that's just the stress of life. With my oldest two, like I said, I started off exclusively breastfeeding for about 6 months, and I was in school with both of them. And so, just having other things to do besides, raising a baby full time, I think, formula is just easily available to, mix it up and feed it to your baby, especially when they're crying and, someone else can feed them. And so breastfeeding, it is demanding. And so I think it's just the stress of life and everything that goes on with it.
Well, I'm a mom, and I have 3 kids, and in my circle of moms, I was one of a few that chose to breastfeed. Why do you guys think that for African American women, many choose not to breastfeed and choose to bottle feed? I'll go with you, Patrice.
I believe strongly because the majority of Black women in our society are on one income. They're the sole breadwinner in their household. The majority of them are single moms raising the children alone, unfortunately, from the fatherless homes, and they they have to go into work, and I don't believe they have that support that they need to be able to take multiple breaks to pump the breast milk for their babies.
I think it's a lot to do with education. A lot of myself in particular, my mother didn't breastfeed. Her mother didn't breastfeed. So when I chose to breastfeed, even in my own family, it was, it was questioned and it was new for them. Even my nieces and nephews, they're like, oh wow, like, what are you doing? But it's so common among, the Caucasian and other ethnicities to breastfeed. Right. And I loved breastfeeding. It brought upon a bond with me and my babies that I never had with I mean, there's a bond there, but it's something that's different when you're breastfeeding and bottle feeding.
And let me ask you, you chose to bottle feed. In your family, did they breastfeed? Did they encourage it? Talk a little bit about that.
My mother, she breastfed, but my mother-in-law, she did not. And that was something when I decided not to breastfeed, it was a hard choice for me because, you know, a lot of people in my family, they were saying, you really need to breastfeed.
I was going to ask, was there a stigma? Like,
Was
there pressure?
Oh, there was a lot of pressure because my friends that did breastfeed, they said, well, why would you take that away from your child? You need to formula feed. Yeah. And I just said, well, it's just not working. It's not that I don't want to breastfeed, it's just, it's not working at all for our family. So I decided that formula feeding was going to be the best. And yeah, there's definitely a stigma.
And you're saying yes, and I see you guys nodding.
Yes, there is. I mean, I can only remember back to a lot of moms, you know, they have trouble. You know, it can be very hard, and it could bring a lot of pain if you're not, the baby's not latching on right. And so again, that goes back to the education and being able to do it the right way. And once you do get it, for me, it was great and it lasted. But let me just say this about myself. I have a medical condition that actually causes me to have daytime sleepiness and not to be alert. And when you have a baby, we all know as moms, you've got to be up.
To be alert.
And you know, when I had my first child, my mom was always saying, you need to be alert, you need to be on your medication. I had to, of course, it would come through the breast milk. And so I could not continue breastfeeding the baby because what was best for the baby was for the baby not to get any of the medication if I'm getting it. But it was going to be best for me to be alert and awake and just to be able to take care of the baby and provide for the baby the way I needed to as a mom.
But do you guys get the support at home when it comes to feeding and especially breastfeeding moms?
I do. I choose, if my daughter is with me, I exclusively breastfeed her. The only time I give her a bottle is if she's not with me. And so a lot of time my husband is like, well, I can feed her. And I'm like, no, I want to feed her just because I want to save that extra milk. But he is very supportive. My mother is very supportive. And I think that's what kind of has helped me this time around, you know, just exclusively breastfeeding. And, yeah, just having that support. And I think that lack of education in the African-American community, I think that just comes from a lack of education because people still look at me, they're like, oh, you still feed your daughter that way? I'm like, what do you mean, still feed her this way? Like,
because she's, how old is she?
9 months.
She's only 9 months, right?
Yeah, and so I do get it's still a lot of stigma. A lot of people still frown at me when they see me, you know, feeding my daughter, or if I tell them I do breastfeed.
Well, when I found out I was pregnant, I automatically knew that it would most definitely be breastfeeding because of who my mother is, and she works in breastfeeding.
As I was going through the process of helping my daughter, I said to myself, wow, moms really need support. Even though telling moms that in classes I do, when I had to do it myself, you know, and helping her, they really need that support system, someone there to help them. Even by her husband being there to help them was a really good thing.
It's difficult, it is. When I left home from the hospital that first night, it was rough because she wanted to get up every hour and feed for like 10 minutes every hour and feed. But as time progressed, she got better. I believe if I didn't have her helping me out, I would have gave up the first little hurt I had because it's easy to give up, but I would have gave up. But she's, you know, talked me through it, showed me how to do it. This is what you do. Don't do it like that. Make sure she opened her mouth, you know, massage your breast, and show me how to pump a little when I get engorged with too much milk. She's really helped a lot, like a whole lot.
So I tell moms, nurse is the key to breastfeeding, to successful breastfeeding. And usually you tell moms the benefits of breastfeeding, why you should, the dad or grandparents, the benefit of it. They're like, wow, I didn't know that. You know, so then now they're like, okay, I think we can do this. This is worth working with. You know, this is worth trying, you know, and not quitting. And so I have a lot of moms that say, you know, I didn't give up. You know, I didn't quit, you know. And so that's a blessing to hear that they didn't give up. You know, some things that are hard, you know. And so we have to just press forward with that.
Right now, I don't have plans of how long I'm planning on breastfeeding. I will try to do it as much as I can, for as long as I can. But I know it's gonna probably get pretty tough going back to work.
We have 3 children under 3, twin daughters who turned 3 in November, and we have a new son, Phoenix, who is about 2.5 months old.
The first few weeks that he was home, I exclusively nursed. I was not pumping. I did not want to pump. I wasn't looking forward to it. But as I'm getting closer to going back to work, I wanted to start saving up some breast milk to give to his daycare when he starts there.
Most of the time at night, she comes out and she pumps in the big room, and I feed Phoenix in the bedroom. It's faster that way. She gets more milk so she can store up for daycare, and it helps us kind of transition him and have him ready for when he's at daycare.
Now I'm pumping a few times a day, and I also still nurse him some. It also takes longer to nurse him, so we've found a system where if I'm nursing him, if I'm pumping and then my husband is giving him a bottle of expressed milk, that works out well for us just because we're on the go a lot. It's really hard because the twins take a lot of time.
We have no problems adding formula into the mix or using it as necessary when we're running around town and shuttling children to doctor's appointments and whatnot, places where for time or just other issues it's not practical for Susan to breastfeed.
For me, the benefits at this point still outweigh the costs, although there are certainly moments when I say, forget it, I'm done, this is too hard. But so far, it's going well. And I made it a year pumping with the girls. So, I kind of have that in my head as, okay, if I could do it with them, maybe I can do it with this one too. I'm gonna try.
We sat down and we thought everything out. We thought about the breastfeeding. We just kind of talked about everything and how we're gonna handle our situation. Because at the time I was in school, I was at Mississippi State. And we just figured out how we was gonna handle everything. And from there, we went on. And everything's been great since then. I know most of the time that the mother would have the baby and she would normally get the bun with it, but I always had my time with her too.
With me being in school now, of course, I'm not full breastfeeding all the time, but I do pump when I'm away. So the powder formula helps as well.
I never just wanted to take that time away from her, and I wanted to get my time as well. And we split that time down the middle. She had her when she was breastfeeding. I had her when it's time to change her, get up in the middle of the night. And then with the schedule, it's fine because she get the pump. With the pumps, that's when my time comes in because then she have to have a bottle.
We, coordinate if he has to work or if I have to go to school, we work together. So I think that support system in my life has made a very big difference in how happy I am of being a mom.
Thank you for joining us.
For all of us here at Southern Remedy, good night.
Southern Remedy is underwritten by a grant from the University of Mississippi Medical Center.